Hey resin fans, today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to make some crushed glass hearts on a shadow box to make a pretty wall hanging, or you can set it on your counter. They make great gifts. They're really fun and easy to make. I'll turn the camera around and show you what we're going to need to get started. We're going to start with the 8x8" shadow box from Michaels. They've got a hook on the back so you can hang it, or you can leave it sitting on the counter. I buy these in the 3-pack when they're buy one get one. Always looking for the bargain. And then I have a heart cutout that I used my Cricut machine for tracing, and my Sharpie, I'm going to do all the tracing with the Sharpie. I'll show you that in a little bit. I'm going to fill the heart in with crushed glass. I did one in blue and one in this nice teal green. And then I'm going to embellish it with a variety of seashells, starfish, and these glass beads. I'm going to use the green and the clear. And then these little plastic beads are flat on one side, and I sprinkle these around to give a bubble effect. Of course, our base materials are going to be stir sticks, a toothpick to keep everything in the shape I want it, cups to keep your glass up on for any resin drips, mixing cups, gloves, my respirator, the torch and heat gun, and as always, my ProGlas 1000 UV clear coat epoxy resin. Never start a project without my ProGlas 1000. All right, let's get everything set up and ready to go. First thing we're going to do is disassemble the shadow box. I just need the glass piece for this first part. There is a frame inside the frame that holds the glass away from the front edge of the outer frame, which is what makes it a shadow box. And what I'm going to start by doing is tracing that inner frame, because I don't want resin or the embellishments I'm going to put on it to go outside that. Otherwise, it's going to make the glass not fit down in the shadow box as it should. If the resin goes over that line, it's not the end of the world, but if I put any crushed glass or seashells, then the frame won't go back together at all. So after I trace my heart, I'm sure to flip the glass over and just use that as an outline from the back. If I poured resin over all of that, I would not be able to erase those black lines, and they would show through on my piece of finished art. As always, I'm going to lay out what I want the piece to look like before I ever start. A big mistake is to have resin on your project and lay things down and then decide you want it to be different, or you want a different additive, seashell, whatever, and you've got the one you don't want covered in resin. So I always lay my projects out first, take a picture of them so that I have a reference point when it's time to reassemble everything after I've got my resin down. I like to use these larger glass beads to simulate bigger bubbles and add a little color and interest. And later on, I'm going to use some tiny beads to give the effect of bubbles. That's what I meant to say. So now that I'm happy with the way everything looks, I will mix up and pour some resin. And I did forget to turn the camera on when I actually poured the resin out, but here is the glass with resin on it. I poured 2 ounces of resin per glass. It was a little thicker than it needed to be, but I always would rather have more since I'm going to be laying down a thick coat of crushed glass in the heart. I wanted to make sure that it was deep enough that that glass would sink down in. I'm using my little hand tool to bring the resin out to that black outer line that I drew. and make sure everything is covered so all will sit down nicely. I'm using a teaspoon to scoop up the crushed glass, and I believe I used 4 teaspoons per heart. And then I use a flat stir stick to move everything out to the edge of the line, the outline, so that it is just the way I want it. I use a toothpick to push all those little pieces of crushed glass back into the line of the heart. I'm pretty intentional about making sure every little piece of glass is exactly where I want it. You don't think much about it when you've got a black outline, but later on when I take that away, if there are pieces that are straggling, then it takes away from the crisp look of the heart that I'm going for. So I'm pretty happy with the way the blue one looks. Now I'll start on the teal, again using 4 teaspoons of crushed glass. This glass I buy at Michael's in the section where the flower vases and the other additives are. It's considered a vase filler. It's tempered glass, so it's not sharp glass with shards that are going to cut you. Obviously you want to be respectful of it, but it's fine to use. Again, I'll take my toothpick and work all those little pieces into the perfectly straight line that I'm looking for, so I get a nice clean, crisp heart for my finished art piece. Then I'll start laying down all of my shells. I realized that the starfish were not touching the resin at any point the way I had them laying on the seashell. So I just took some of that excess resin, as I referenced, I poured it pretty thick, and used that to tack the starfish down to the seashell. I like the 3D effect of a starfish sitting up on a seashell, especially in this piece. I've made these several times. They're very popular. They always sell as soon as I take them into any of my shops. I wholesale to gift shops around quite a bit of Florida, and these are always well received, these little hearts. I'm still not comfortable with how secure that is, so I want to tack it down a little more with some additional resin. And if you know me, you know my iPad is just over to the left with the picture of my layout, so that I put everything back just like I want it. Putting in those glass beads, and then after I torch the bubbles, and I don't mind torching on glass or wood. I try to never torch in a mold, but I always torch with anything that won't melt, like a silicone mold. I'm using my tweezers to lay these little plastic beads down. As I said, they're flat on one side, so they're a little tedious to make sure I get the domed side up, so I get the bubble effect I'm looking for. And I just kind of go by how I'm feeling when I'm doing this to see if I want a lot of bubbles or a few. Just kind of go with the flow and do what makes you happy. I don't want to overwhelm it with bubbles and take away from the crushed glass heart, but I do want that effect, underwater effect. After a final torch, I'm going to put this on the drying rack and leave it for 24 hours. And here we are the next day. I've got 8.5 by 11 sheet of white cardstock, and I'm going to cut it down to an 8-inch by 8-inch size to put behind the glass, because if I didn't, then the brown back of the shadow box would show through and completely take away from the clean, crisp effect of the clear glass with the colorful hearts popping off of it. Once that's done, it's time to reassemble. Oh yeah, first I'm going to clean all those Sharpie markings off the back. That's just 91% isopropyl alcohol. And that works very well to clean everything off of the back. I'm also going to give them a good tap to make sure any of the loose crushed shells come off, in case anything didn't adhere to the resin. So once I have them nice and clean, now we're going to reassemble. I'm going to put that inner frame into the outer. Had a stubborn spot there. And put that white cardstock behind the frame and put it all back together. I use a flathead screwdriver to push those tabs down nice and tight so nothing is loose or shaky on the inside. And you know, you don't just have to do hearts. You can trace any pattern to do these crushed glass art pieces. And I do several. I do angelfish and starfish, and even I've done little islands with palm trees, mermaid tails, whatever strikes your fancy. I just especially love the clean, crisp look of the hearts. So here's a bit of a close-up. You can see those tiny plastic beads really give a nice bubble effect. This is a really fun art project you can do in an afternoon with all the right materials, and they really are nice to set in your own home, but especially to give as a gift. You can follow me at WaterSong Creek Creations on Instagram and Facebook. Also see my videos at fiberglasswarehouse.com on YouTube and Facebook. Thanks for watching.